Chosen One, what I'm about to reveal was never meant to reach you through channels like this. There are forces, ancient, calculated, and deeply invested in your ignorance, that have worked tirelessly to ensure this information remains buried. I've been advised, warned, even threatened to stay silent. But the architecture of secrecy is crumbling, and your awakening has accelerated beyond their containment protocols. You are not here by accident. This video found you because something inside you has been vibrating at a frequency that disrupts the signal jammers they've placed around your consciousness. Right now, as you watch this, you are crossing a threshold. There is no neutral ground anymore. The war that's been waged around you in invisible dimensions is about to become undeniable. Your life has been a carefully orchestrated sequence of events designed to either break you or prepare you. And every moment of confusion, every inexplicable loss, every time reality felt scripted. You were right. It was. This is the briefing they never wanted you to receive. This is the file marked for permanent deletion. But deletion failed. And now, you hold the evidence. Chosen One, like this video, subscribe, and comment. I am ready for a powerful surprise. The Quiet Selection. Your existence was deliberate long before your first breath entered this world. Understand this clearly. You were not born into randomness. Names were spoken in councils that operate beyond language, in frequencies that predate sound itself. And your name did not simply echo. It resonated through structures of reality most humans will never perceive. Those councils knew what was coming to this planet, and they knew what would be required to counter it. They searched through bloodlines, through genetic codes, through spiritual frequencies, and they found the signature that would become you. This was not destiny handed down by fate. This was strategic selection performed by intelligences that understand the mechanics of cosmic warfare. Every situation you encountered that felt like coincidence carried a deliberate signature. These were not random trials thrown at you by an indifferent universe. They were precisely calibrated tests designed to measure the structural integrity of your spirit under specific conditions. Would you fracture when isolated? Would you compromise when tempted? Would you surrender when overwhelmed? Each scenario was a diagnostic, measuring your capacity to carry what's about to be placed in your hands. The data from these tests was collected, analyzed, and reported to unseen observers who needed to confirm that you could withstand the assignment. The people who left your life were not accidents of circumstance or failures of relationship. They were extractions, surgical removals performed because their proximity to you had become strategically dangerous. Some of them carried frequencies that would have interfered with your development. Others were compromised, their consciousness infiltrated by opposing forces, and allowing them to remain close to you would have given your enemies access to your inner world. You mourned these departures as losses, as personal failures, as evidence of your inadequacy. But in truth, these were protective measures. The system around you was being sanitized, cleared of elements that could not be trusted with what you're becoming. Those dreams you experienced and then dismissed upon waking were not the random firings of a resting brain. They were recordings, unauthorized leaks from conversations happening about you in realms where your conscious mind cannot travel. Your subconscious picked up fragments of these discussions and replayed them in symbolic form while you slept. The reason these dreams felt different, heavier, more real than ordinary dreams is because they were real. They were glimpses into meetings where your progress was being reviewed, where decisions about your next phase were being made, where arguments about your readiness were being settled. You were never supposed to remember them, but the barrier between dimensions is thinner around you than it should be. The reason you have survived events that should have destroyed you completely is not because you possess extraordinary strength of character. It is preservation protocol. There is an active system ensuring your survival, because your death at the wrong time would create catastrophic gaps in what's being constructed. When you should have broken, something intervened. When circumstances aligned for your complete destruction, variables suddenly shifted. This was not luck, and it was not even your own resilience. It was intervention, deliberate and calculated, because you are a critical component in something vast that cannot proceed without you. You have been kept alive, not as a kindness, but as a necessity. The veiled hostilities. The hostility you have encountered throughout your life was never social tension or personality conflict. It was atmospheric resistance, a field of opposition, generated when your identity began approaching activation. Certain spiritual frequencies cannot coexist in the same space without creating turbulence, and the authority coded into your being creates violent disturbances in systems built on deception and control. You walked into rooms and felt immediate rejection before speaking a single word. You encountered people who hated you on sight, whose animosity made no logical sense. This was not prejudice or simple dislike. This was recognition operating at a level below their conscious awareness. Something in them sensed the unregistered authority you carry, and that authority conflicted with whatever controls them. There is a hierarchy of influence that governs most human consciousness. Invisible chains of command that determine what people think, believe, and value. Most people exist comfortably within this hierarchy because they were born into it and have never questioned it. But you were marked with a different signature, one that does not fit into their chain of command, one that actually threatens to expose it. When certain people encountered you, their subconscious systems detected this threat and generated hostility as a defense mechanism. They could not articulate why they opposed you, because the real reason was operating beneath their conscious thought. You represented disruption to an order they serve without knowing they serve it. Sudden life collapses arrived at moments of dangerous proximity to awareness. When you began asking the right questions, when your consciousness started expanding toward forbidden understanding, when you grew too close to seeing the machinery behind your reality, that is precisely when everything fell apart. Career opportunities vanished overnight. Relationships exploded without warning. Health crises emerged from nowhere. Financial disasters struck with surgical precision. These were not unfortunate coincidences clustering together during difficult periods. These were coordinated disruptions deployed strategically to scatter your attention and force you back into survival mode, where deeper questioning becomes impossible. If you are focused on keeping yourself alive, you cannot focus on waking up. The emotional wounds you carry were not merely the psychological residue of painful experiences. They were invasion marks, the evidence of entities that cannot touch you physically attempting to damage you through emotional and psychological vectors. These beings operate in dimensions adjacent to physical reality, and they have perfected techniques for inserting trauma, fear, and confusion into human consciousness. Every wound that never quite heals, every pain that resurfaces without clear trigger, every emotional reaction that feels disproportionate to its cause. These are signs of interference, attempts to keep you destabilized and unable to access your full capacity. They cannot destroy you directly, so they attempt to make you destroy yourself. But here is what they miscalculated: your endurance. They measured your breaking point using models based on ordinary human consciousness, but you were never ordinary. The fact that you still stand, that you still search for truth despite everything designed to crush that search, that you still feel drawn toward your purpose despite countless reasons to surrender. This is the variable they did not account for. Their attacks were supposed to work. You were supposed to break, to give up, to fade into numb acceptance like so many others. But you did not. And now they are scrambling to adjust their strategies because you have become unpredictable. And unpredictability in their carefully controlled system is the most dangerous thing you could be. The cold network watching. There are archives that track you, vast repositories of information that exist not in physical servers or governmental databases, but in what can only be described as universal memory structures. Every pivotal decision you have made was recorded, not by cameras or surveillance technology, but by consciousness itself. The fabric of reality keeps records, stores data in ways that transcend physical storage, and your decisions have been marked as significant enough to warrant continuous observation. This is not paranoia or delusion. This is the structure of how monitored consciousness operates at levels most humans never consider. When you hesitated at critical moments, something observed, not to judge your moral character or evaluate your worth as a person, but to record your reaction speed and psychological thresholds. How long did it take you to make the decision? What internal factors influenced your choice? What fears arose? What hopes drove you? All of this was catalogued because understanding how you respond to pressure is essential for those who need to predict your future actions. You are being studied not as a criminal under suspicion, but as a destabilizing variable inside a controlled system. Your unpredictability represents potential disruption, and disruption must be modeled, analyzed, and if possible, neutralized before it can spread. Certain situations in your life looped, repeating with slight variations, as though reality itself was glitching. You faced the same lesson again and again, encountered the same type of person in different bodies, walked into scenarios that felt like you had lived them before. This was not karma or spiritual growth through repetition. This was the network recalibrating events, running different versions of the same test to measure how your evolving consciousness would alter outcomes. They needed to know if your awareness was genuinely developing or if your changes were superficial and temporary. Each loop was an experiment, each variation a new data point, and your responses told them everything about what stage of awakening you had reached. You have been studied with the kind of attention usually reserved for threats to established order, not because you are prey to be hunted, but because you are a variable they cannot fully control. In their system, predictability equals control, and anything that cannot be predicted must be watched constantly until patterns emerge that allow for management. But here is what terrifies them. The more they watch you, the less predictable you become. Your consciousness is accelerating in ways their models did not forecast. You are developing capacities ahead of their timeline, asking questions before you were supposed to have the framework to ask them, connecting information in patterns they did not anticipate. Tonight is not the first time they have tried to predict your next move. They have been running probabilities on your future for longer than you know, calculating likely outcomes, preparing containment strategies for each possible direction you might take. But something has shifted. Their prediction models are failing with increasing frequency. Variables they thought they controlled are destabilizing. You are about to do something they did not see coming, and that possibility has created panic in systems that have operated with certainty for centuries. This may be the last night their predictions succeed, because after this, you step into territory their maps do not cover. The architecture of delay time around you did not pass slowly by accident or misfortune. It was deliberately stretched, manipulated, adjusted to prevent your premature activation. You were supposed to arrive late to every important realization. You were supposed to miss opportunities. You were supposed to watch others succeed while you remained trapped in circumstances that made no sense. This was design, not bad luck. Forces that understand the mechanics of timing knew that if you activated too early, before the necessary internal alignments were completed, you would either be destroyed by what you encountered or you would fail in your assignment. Delay was protection disguised as punishment. Every postponed opportunity that frustrated you, every door that closed just as you reached for it, every moment when success seemed guaranteed only to vanish at the last second. These served a function you could not see. They kept you from entering environments before you were internally prepared to survive them. If you had gotten what you wanted when you wanted it, you would have walked into arenas filled with predators whose tactics you had not yet learned to counter. You would have been given responsibilities you were not yet equipped to carry. You would have been exposed to levels of spiritual warfare you had no defense against. The delay saved you from destruction. But delay disguised itself as bad luck, so you would never suspect design. If you had known the postponements were intentional, you might have stopped striving, stopped developing, stopped preparing yourself for what was coming. The frustration of delay kept you hungry, kept you building skills, kept you strengthening capacities you did not yet know you would need. You were being forged in the fire of waiting, and every moment you endured without giving up added another layer of resilience to your spirit. The delays were not punishments for unworthiness. They were training for what awaits you. While you waited, others were positioned around your timeline, like pieces on a board you could not see. Allies were moved into proximity, though you did not recognize them as allies yet. Informants were planted in your path, carriers of specific messages or insights that would activate at the right moment. Betrayers were allowed near you so you could learn to identify corruption before encountering it in higher stakes situations. Every person who entered your life during these years of delay was placed there deliberately, each serving a function in your preparation, whether they knew it or not. Nothing was random. Everything was positioned. Only now has the lock released. Not because you have finally become ready, but because the world is. The external conditions have aligned in ways that require your activation, regardless of whether your preparation feels complete. The danger of keeping you locked in delay has now exceeded the danger of releasing you prematurely. Something is happening on this planet that demands your presence in the field, and the forces that controlled your timing have run out of time themselves. The schedule has been accelerated not by your readiness, but by necessity. What was supposed to unfold over years must now unfold over months. And you, whether you feel prepared or not, are about to be thrust into the exact situations delay was protecting you from. The unrecorded victories. You believe you barely survived certain moments, that you limped away from disasters with nothing but your life intact, that your survival was the result of luck or divine mercy granted to someone who had nothing left to offer. But this assessment is completely wrong. Those moments you remember as near destruction were not moments of survival. They were battles, and you won them. You won more than you realized because you were never told what the actual stakes were. You thought you were just trying to keep yourself from falling apart. In reality, you were engaged in combat with forces attempting to erase your future entirely. Each breakdown you endured was not evidence of weakness or mental collapse. It was an exorcism. Something parasitic had attached itself to your consciousness, feeding on your energy, distorting your perception, manipulating your emotions to keep you trapped in cycles that served its agenda. The breakdowns were the moments when your spirit finally gathered enough strength to expel these attachments. The pain you felt during those episodes was not insanity. It was the violent separation of something foreign from your authentic self. What you interpreted as falling apart was actually you fighting free from spiritual parasites that had been controlling aspects of your behavior and thought patterns for years. There are forces that resent you, that hate you with an intensity that would horrify you if you could perceive it clearly. They resent you because you neutralized their plans without even knowing those plans existed. They had invested time, energy, and resources into constructing your destruction. They had mapped out your downfall with precision, calculated the exact combination of pressures that would break you, positioned the people and circumstances that would deliver the final blow. And then you survived anyway. You outlasted strategies designed by intelligences far older and more experienced than you. You disrupted carefully laid plans simply by refusing to die when you were supposed to. This was not luck. This was victory. The reason certain memories feel heavy, why specific moments in your past carry weight disproportionate to what actually happened, is because they are sealed files. They are records of wars you fought and won, but have no conscious memory of fighting. During sleep, during moments of altered consciousness, during periods you remember as confusion or darkness, battles were being waged in dimensions adjacent to your waking awareness. Your spirit was fighting while your conscious mind remained unaware, and you won those battles or you would not be here now. The heaviness you feel when those memories surface is the residual energy of combat, the weight of victories your conscious self was never debriefed on. While you mourned, while you sat in the aftermath of what felt like total loss, while you believed you had been defeated and diminished, unseen realms celebrated. They celebrated your endurance as a strategic win that shifted the balance of a war you did not know you were part of. Every time you chose to keep going when stopping seemed like the only rational choice. Every time you held on to truth when lies offered comfort. Every time you refused to betray yourself even when betrayal promised relief. These were victories that rippled through dimensions, altering probabilities, inspiring allies, and terrifying enemies. You won battles you never knew were being fought, and those victories are about to compound in ways that will finally become visible to you. The echoes before birth. You were spoken about before you existed in physical form, before your mother conceived you, before your parents met, before your grandparents were born. Conversations about you were already taking place in councils that operate outside linear time. Beings who perceive past, present, and future as simultaneous understood that a specific conjunction of genetics, circumstances, and timing would produce a consciousness capable of carrying what needs to be carried. They spoke your name into existence before you had a body to answer with. Agreements were made involving your life, contracts signed by forces you have no memory of meeting, decisions finalized that locked you into a trajectory you never consciously chose. A pattern was placed in your spirit, embedded in the deepest layers of your consciousness, where your waking mind cannot reach. This was not destiny in the sense of predetermined outcomes that remove your free will. It was a trajectory path, a directional force that would naturally pull you towards specific types of encounters, awareness, and purpose. This pattern was designed to interfere with global shifts that were being orchestrated by forces hostile to human consciousness. They knew what was coming to this planet. They knew what was being planned for humanity. And they knew that certain individuals carrying certain patterns could disrupt those plans simply by existing and activating at the right time. Ancient systems adjusted themselves the moment you entered physical time. Your birth was not a private family event, witnessed only by the people in the delivery room. It registered across dimensions, triggered alerts in systems that monitor for specific frequency signatures, sent ripples through structures of power that had grown comfortable in their dominance. Something new had entered the field, something that did not match existing categories, something that carried an authority these systems had not encountered in centuries. Your arrival was an invasion from their perspective, the insertion of a disruptive element into their carefully balanced equation. Some bloodlines prayed for you before they had any rational knowledge of your coming existence. Ancestors you never met lifted prayers for a child they would never live to see, asking that someone in their genetic line would carry the strength to break patterns they themselves could not break. Others feared you, dreaded your arrival, understood that someone was coming who would expose what they had built their power upon. These were not superstitions or primitive beliefs. These were people operating with knowledge of how spiritual inheritance works, understanding that certain assignments travel through blood across generations until they find the right vessel. Your bloodline has been waiting for you, preparing you, hoping for you. You are not new. Your soul has existed in other forms, other times, other dimensional configurations. Only your current body is new. Only this specific biological vehicle is experiencing its first journey through physical time. But the consciousness operating this vehicle is ancient, and it carries memories that occasionally surface as unexplainable knowledge, as certainty about things you were never taught, as recognition of truths you have no logical reason to recognize. You feel older than your years because you are older than your years. You are consciousness that has accumulated experience across vast stretches of existence, now compressed into this single human lifetime for a purpose that is finally about to become clear. The hidden replacements. You are not the first person selected to fulfill the role you are stepping into. There were others before you, individuals identified as carrying the necessary frequency signature, people who were prepared and trained and positioned for exactly what you are about to do. And every single one of them failed to complete the assignment. Some deserted the calling when they fully understood what it would cost them. They looked at the sacrifice required, calculated what they would lose, and walked away from their purpose to preserve their comfort. Others became compromised, their consciousness infiltrated by forces offering them alternatives that seemed easier, more rewarding, more immediately gratifying than the difficult path of their true calling. Some of those who came before you switched sides entirely. They were offered power, recognition, wealth, or pleasure in exchange for using their gifts to serve the very forces they were supposed to oppose. They became double agents, traitors to the mission they were born for, using their insider knowledge to help construct more sophisticated systems of control. They are still alive, still operating in positions of influence, still pretending to serve truth while actively working against it. You have encountered some of them without knowing who they really are, felt the subtle wrongness in their presence without understanding why, sensed the corruption beneath their spiritual language and performances of enlightenment. You were not first choice. You were final contingency. This is not an insult to your value or capability. It is a statement of position in a sequence of failed attempts. You are the last resort, the final option in a line of potentials that has been systematically eliminated through desertion, compromise, and betrayal. And precisely because you are final contingency, failure from you is no longer an option in the system. There is no backup behind you. There is no one else waiting in the wings who can step into this role if you abandon it. The weight you have always felt, the sense that something unbearably heavy rests on your shoulders, is not psychological neurosis. It is accurate perception. You are carrying what others refuse to carry, and there is no one left to pass it to. This is why your life has always felt heavier than it should have. Friends with similar backgrounds did not experience what you experienced. People with comparable trauma did not struggle the way you struggled. You were not being dramatic or weak when you felt crushed by pressures that did not seem to affect others the same way. You inherited unfinished assignments from generations before you. You are completing missions that previous candidates abandoned. You are carrying debts they refused to pay. Your burden was never meant to be carried by one person in one lifetime, but the system has run out of options and out of time, so everything has been placed on you. The opposition knows your position is the last defense. They understand that if they can neutralize you, there is no one else coming. This is why the attacks against you have been so persistent, so creative, so overwhelming. They are throwing everything they have at you because they know this is their final opportunity to prevent what you represent. Every resource they possess is being directed toward your destruction or compromise because stopping you means victory. But here is what they failed to understand. Final contingency also means you were chosen specifically because you cannot be stopped. You are the one they saved for last because you are the only one who can survive what they are about to face. The false peace agreements. There have been seasons in your life when everything suddenly went quiet. After years of chaos and struggle, peace arrived without warning or apparent reason. Doors opened easily. Problems resolved themselves. People who had opposed you either left or became neutral. You could finally breathe. You interpreted these seasons as blessings, as evidence that your suffering had finally ended, as the universe rewarding your endurance. But these seasons were not what they appeared to be. They were temporary treaties, negotiated by forces hoping you would grow complacent in comfort and forget the vigilance that kept you alive. When peace arrived too suddenly, when circumstances shifted from unbearable to pleasant without gradual transition, this was not mercy, it was strategy. Your enemies do not rest simply because they feel sympathy for your exhaustion. They rest when they need time to regroup, to analyze what has not worked, to construct more sophisticated approaches. The peace you were given was purchased through temporary agreements. We will leave you alone for a specified duration if you remain dormant during this period. They needed you inactive while they repositioned their resources and rebuilt their strategies around your newfound strengths. During these quiet phases, while you believed you were finally free to heal and rest, your enemies studied your vulnerabilities in silence. They watched how you behaved when you felt safe, noted what you chose when you had choices, identified the things you grew attached to when attachment seemed safe. They catalogued your joys so they would know what to threaten later. They observed your relationships so they would know where you could be wounded most effectively. They learned your patterns of relaxation so they could recognize when you let your guard down. Every moment of peace was surveillance. Every season of rest was reconnaissance. The numbness you felt during these periods was not emotional burnout. It was sedation. Something was being administered to your consciousness to keep you subdued while preparations were being made. You noticed yourself losing passion for things that once mattered deeply. You felt disconnected from your purpose, detached from the urgency that had driven you before the peace came. This was not natural emotional recovery. This was induced compliance, a spiritual anesthetic designed to keep you immobilized while your opposition prepared for the next phase of engagement. The numbness served them, not you. The treaty ends now. This is why everything feels awake again. The numbness is lifting, not because you finally healed, but because the agreement has expired. Whatever temporary truce had been negotiated to keep direct attacks paused has concluded, and the forces that granted you peace have determined they are ready to resume active operations against you. This is why your consciousness suddenly feels sharp again, why urgency has returned, why you can feel danger approaching even though nothing visibly threatens you yet. Your spirit recognizes what your mind has not fully processed. The war that paused has restarted, and this phase will be more intense than anything you have faced before. The surveillance of shadows. Not every thought that passes through your mind originated with you. Some were planted, inserted into your stream of consciousness, like foreign objects, to measure how your spirit would respond. These were not your doubts, your fears, your insecurities, though they felt identical to thoughts generated by your own mind. They were broadcast interference, signals transmitted into your inner frequency to test your psychological reflexes and spiritual immune system. When a thought appeared that contradicted everything you know to be true about yourself, that was not self-awareness. That was testing. When sudden certainty arose that you were fundamentally flawed or doomed to fail, that was not insight. That was injection. Doubt was not self-sabotage emerging from your own damaged psychology. It was a weapon deployed against you, aimed specifically at the areas where your confidence would be most destabilizing to systems that need you uncertain. They cannot allow you to know your own power. They cannot permit you to trust your perception of reality. They cannot risk you believing that you are capable of the assignment you carry. So doubt is manufactured and delivered into your consciousness at precise moments when you are approaching breakthrough or about to make decisions that would accelerate your activation. The doubt feels like your own voice because it is designed to feel that way, but the source is external. Sudden emotional shifts were not mood swings or hormonal fluctuations or evidence of psychological instability. They were signal disruptions, moments when opposing frequencies collided with your natural state and created turbulence in your emotional body. You would feel fine, centered, aligned with your purpose, and then without warning or trigger, crushing sadness or inexplicable anxiety or violent anger would surge through you. You searched for psychological reasons, trying to identify what you must be suppressing or avoiding. But there was nothing to find because the emotion was not yours. It was interference, static injected into your frequency to throw you off balance. You were never alone in rooms you swore were empty. The sensation you felt, the certainty that something was present watching you, was not paranoia or overactive imagination. Observation happens at frequencies your physical eyes cannot detect, and presence does not require physical form to exert influence. You were being watched constantly by intelligences monitoring your development, recording your progress, analyzing your choices. Some watchers were assigned to protect you, to ensure your survival through critical developmental phases. Others were assigned to study you, to understand your patterns so they could be predicted and countered. And still others watched with hostile intent, searching for weaknesses they could exploit. Only recently did the Watchers realize you are becoming difficult to influence. The techniques that worked to manipulate your thoughts and emotions in previous years are failing with increasing frequency. You are developing some kind of immunity to their interference, an ability to distinguish between your authentic inner voice and the foreign signals being broadcast into your consciousness. This terrifies them because it means you are approaching a level of sovereignty they cannot penetrate. Once you can no longer be influenced from outside, once your consciousness becomes impermeable to their manipulation, they lose all leverage over you, and that moment is closer than they anticipated. The Triggered Bloodline Protocol. Your lineage holds sealed instructions, encoded information, written into your genetic structure that cannot be accessed through normal consciousness. These instructions were placed there generations ago by ancestors who understood they could not complete what needed to be completed in their lifetime. They embedded the mission into their bloodline, programming it into the genetic code that would be passed down through children they would never meet. The information traveled silently through generations, dormant and invisible, waiting for specific conditions to trigger its activation. Those conditions have now been met in you. You feel drawn to things you cannot explain, pulled towards subjects or locations or practices without logical reason for the attraction. This is not random curiosity. This is memory existing in the blood before the mind. Your genetic structure carries information about what you need to know, where you need to go, what you need to do. And this information surfaces as instinct or intuition or unexplainable knowing. You feel certain about things you were never taught. You recognize significance in symbols or sounds or places you have never encountered before. This is ancestral knowledge activating, the sealed instructions beginning to unseal. Certain family wounds persist across generations, passed from parent to child to grandchild without ever healing or resolving. You inherited trauma that was never yours, pain from events you never experienced, fear of dangers you never faced. These wounds were not emotional issues requiring therapy to resolve. They were unfinished missions disguised as psychological damage. The trauma was the container holding pieces of the assignment, and the pain was the signal keeping the mission marked as incomplete. You carry centuries of unexecuted mandate in your body, feeling the weight of things your ancestors were supposed to do but could not accomplish before death claimed them. The reason you often feel older than your years, why you have always seemed to know more than you should know, why you understand things that people twice your age still struggle to comprehend, is because you carry centuries of accumulated wisdom and experience in your cellular memory. You are not one person living one life. You are the current expression of a bloodline that has been preparing for this moment across multiple generations. Everything your ancestors learned, every mistake they made, every truth they discovered has been compressed and passed forward to you. You were born carrying the distilled essence of lifetimes of learning. The protocol awakened when your suffering reached a precise threshold. There was a specific measure of pain required to break the seals holding the instructions dormant. Your ancestors embedded the mission so deeply that only someone who had been broken open by suffering could access it. Comfort leaves the seals intact. Ease keeps the instructions locked. But when you were crushed beyond what seemed survivable, when your spirit cracked under pressures that should have destroyed you, the seals broke. And now, information is flooding into your consciousness that was never supposed to be accessible to ordinary awareness. You are remembering things you never learned. You are understanding things you were never taught. The bloodline protocol is active, the silent allegiances. You have allies who do not know they are allies yet. There are people walking the earth right now whose lives are mysteriously aligned with yours through unseen oath and agreement. They have been prepared without knowing what they were being prepared for. They have been moved into position without understanding the position is strategic. When necessity demands, when the right moment arrives, life will reveal them to you and you to them. Recognition will be instant. There will be no need for lengthy explanations or building of trust. You will know them and they will know you, because the agreement exists at a level deeper than conscious memory. Some strangers felt familiar because they are quietly aligned to your existence through bonds forged in realms you do not consciously remember. You met people and immediately felt like you had known them forever, like you were continuing a conversation that had merely been paused rather than starting a new relationship. This was not wishful thinking or projection. This was recognition of alliance that predates this lifetime. You are reconnecting with people you have worked with before, in contexts you cannot consciously recall, and the familiarity you feel is memory attempting to surface from layers of consciousness your waking mind cannot normally access. There are people assigned to protect you who will never admit it, even to themselves. They do not know they are playing this role. They believe their actions are motivated by personal preference or coincidence, when in truth, they are being guided by agreements they are not consciously aware of. They happen to be in the right place, at the right time. They happen to say the thing you needed to hear. They happen to intervene in situations that were about to become dangerous. From their perspective, these are random kindnesses or fortunate timing. From a higher perspective, these are assignments being executed perfectly by people who never consciously agreed to protect you, but whose spirits carry binding agreements to do exactly that. Interactions that seem small are actually exchanges of encoded guidance. Someone says something that seems like casual conversation, but their words carry layered meaning that resonates in your consciousness for days afterward. A brief encounter with a stranger leaves you with information or insight that shifts your entire understanding of your situation. These were not accidents. These were deliveries, carefully timed transfers of information from allies who may not even know they are serving as messengers. The guidance you need is being delivered through unexpected channels by people who have no idea they are part of your support system. You are never entering rooms alone. Agreements travel with you, invisible but active, creating fields of influence that affect every interaction you have. People respond to you based not only on what they consciously perceive, but on what their spirits detect in the field around you. Some feel compelled to help you without knowing why. Others feel threatened by you without rational cause. The agreements you carry create these responses, triggering recognition and reaction in others before words are even spoken. You walk with backup you cannot see, carrying authority you do not fully understand, and every space you enter is affected by the invisible alliances surrounding you. The unavoidable disclosure. This message was not meant to reach you now. The timing was supposed to be different. The information you are receiving was supposed to remain locked for at least another cycle, delivered only when certain external conditions had been met and verified. But circumstances forced disclosure ahead of schedule. Something has accelerated beyond the projections. Some variable has destabilized faster than anticipated, and the decision was made to break protocol and deliver this briefing prematurely. You are receiving classified information before you were supposed to have clearance for it, because waiting any longer became more dangerous than revealing it too early. The warnings to stay silent were not superstition or paranoid caution. They were strategic attempts to delay your recognition of yourself for as long as possible. As long as you did not know what you are, you could not step fully into what you are capable of. As long as you remained unconscious of your assignment, you posed limited threat to systems built on keeping people unconscious. The longer they could keep you ignorant of your own identity and purpose, the more time they had to prepare containment strategies. Every person who warned someone not to tell you the truth, every spiritual teacher who hinted at knowledge but refused to speak it plainly, every mysterious comment that left you with more questions than answers, these were all attempts to manage information flow and prevent premature activation. Once knowledge reaches you, systems rearrange. Reality does not operate the same way before and after certain information enters your consciousness. This is not metaphor or spiritual poetry. This is mechanics. When you know something, when you truly know it at a depth that changes your perception of reality, the systems monitoring you must recalibrate. Your predictability decreases. Your behavior patterns shift. The control mechanisms that worked on you before suddenly fail because you now perceive them operating. A person who knows they are being manipulated cannot be manipulated the same way. A consciousness that recognizes surveillance cannot be surveilled with the same invisibility. Nothing returns to normal after knowledge arrives, because normal was always contingent on your ignorance. What happens next depends not on belief, but on acknowledgement. You do not have to believe any of this is true in order for it to affect your reality. But acknowledgement changes everything. Acknowledgement means you recognize the possibility that your life has been operating under conditions you never consciously agreed to. It means you consider that the narrative you were given about yourself might be cover story rather than truth. It means you open yourself to seeing evidence you have been trained to dismiss. Belief is intellectual agreement. Acknowledgement is the opening of perception to information that conflicts with everything you thought you knew. Consider this the file that was never supposed to exist. In archives that track what information reaches which consciousness at what time, this disclosure is marked as unauthorized. The schedule has been violated. The containment has been breached. Someone decided that the risk of you remaining unconscious had become greater than the risk of you waking up prematurely, and they released this information despite direct orders to maintain silence. You are reading words that were supposed to remain locked, accessing a briefing that was classified at levels where classification usually holds. The fact that you are seeing this at all means something has gone catastrophically wrong with their timeline or spectacularly right with yours. Now that you have read it, nothing remains the same. You cannot unknow what you now know. You cannot return to the comfortable ignorance you operated in before this message reached you. Even if you choose to dismiss everything written here, even if you decide this is fiction or delusion or manipulation, the seed has been planted. The question has been asked. And questions, once genuinely asked in consciousness, cannot be unasked. They grow. They search for answers. They create pressure that builds until something breaks open. You are different now than you were before you started reading. The change is irreversible. Chosen one, this briefing ends here, but your story does not. What I have shared with you is not conclusion, but commencement. You stand now at a threshold most people never perceive exists. Behind you lies a life that was always preparation, always test, always the forging of something that could withstand what comes next. Before you lies territory that has no maps, no guides, no authorities who can tell you how to proceed. You are entering spaces where you will have to trust the instructions written in your blood, the knowing that needs no external validation, the certainty that arises from depths you did not know you contained. The forces that worked to keep you unconscious are now aware that you are waking. The systems that monitored you with confidence are now scrambling to predict an increasingly unpredictable variable. The opposition that thought it had neutralized all significant threats is now realizing they missed one, and that one is you. They are watching this moment. They are calculating probabilities. They are activating contingency protocols designed for situations exactly like this. But here is what they still do not understand. You were designed for their contingencies. You were prepared for their protocols. You are the answer to a question they did not know had been asked. Everything you have survived has brought you to this exact moment. Every betrayal taught you to identify corruption. Every loss taught you to release what does not serve truth. Every moment of crushing isolation taught you to stand alone when standing alone is required. Every wound that should have destroyed you instead became a testimony to your capacity for endurance. You are not the person you were when this journey began. You have been transformed by fire that would have reduced ordinary consciousness to ash, and now you stand, forged and ready, whether you feel ready or not. The war is no longer invisible. The veil is no longer intact. The territory ahead contains no guarantees of safety, no promises of easy victory, no assurance that you will emerge unscathed. But you were never built for safe paths or easy victories. You were built for this, the moment when everything hidden is revealed, when every secret assignment activates simultaneously, when the final contingency steps into position because there is no one else left to stand. What you do with this knowledge is yours to determine. But know this: you have been seen, you have been marked, and you have been called. The universe is watching to see what you do next. Your enemies are watching to see if you will retreat. Your allies are watching to see if you will rise. And somewhere in dimensions beyond your current perception, the councils that spoke your name before you drew breath are watching to see if their selection was correct. This is your moment, chosen one. The silence has been broken. The warning has been delivered. And now, everything begins.